Hello everybody, welcome back to the garden. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's finally time to transplant our seedlings outside, and that's what today's video is going to be all about. I'm going to share with you some tips on transplanting your seedlings outside that are going to help make sure that you don't kill or even damage your seedlings when doing so. There's a couple of very simple things that if we do, we can make sure we encourage the best harvest as possible in our gardens this year. Today, we've got cucumbers, zucchinis, tomatoes, and watermelon to transplant out in the garden. I've been growing the cucumbers, zucchini, and tomato from seed, and so now it's time to transplant. How do we know when to transplant? Timing is the first thing that we want to look at when transplanting our seedlings outdoors. A great way and a free resource to look at when referencing timing is going to be the Farmer's Almanac. Just go online at the Farmer's Almanac's website, type in your zip code, and you can find the expected planting calendar for your area. One thing to keep in mind is that usually I wait a couple weeks after this date, just because there can be some surprise frost that we weren't expecting. But here in Wisconsin and southeastern Wisconsin, I always plant during Memorial Weekend, and that's the weekend it is right now. So here we are planting our vegetables. I've never had a problem with this before in the past, and so that's why I keep on doing it every single year. I do look at the weather forecast to make sure that there's no expected frost or any temperatures that drop below like 40 degrees, even 45 degrees at night. Because if there still is, then I want to avoid that, or at least cover some of these summer crops that can be a little bit more tender and can really suffer from cold nights like that. Next thing that has to do with timing is making sure that we don't have plants that are too old or root bound. Because even though sometimes we go into the nursery and look for plants that are big and beautiful and look like they're stronger than other plants, a lot of the times those plants are actually going to be root bound. What that means is the roots are just curling up inside of that pot, and they're not going to do well in the garden that way. So sometimes we're better off picking smaller plants from a nursery. Or if you're growing seeds indoors, it's really important to start those seeds at the right time so your plants haven't been growing too long to the point where they're root bound. Another great way to avoid this is by using air pots. I'll show you guys an example of the air pots that I've been using right now. If you do find that you have a major problem with root bound plants year after year and you haven't found a way to fix it, but yet you like to get your seeds started indoors at a certain time, one way that you can fix that problem is by creating air pruning pots. What I've done here is taken a net from an avocado bag and taped it to the bottom of this cup, cut out the bottom of the cup, and that way when the roots grow down, they're going to be air pruned. So instead of going down and circling around, encasing this entire root system, now they're going to be air pruned at the bottom, and it's going to consistently send out more roots from this stem here. Overall, it's going to create an amazing, healthy root system for all of your seedling types. This isn't just for tomatoes, but any seedling you grow indoors can benefit from an air pruning pot. A lot of the times we want to harden off our seedlings so we get them used to the outdoor environment that they're going to be growing in. After they've been growing inside or in a greenhouse, it can be very detrimental to them to suddenly be put outside into an environment with the harsh and bright sunlight above us. So this brings me to my next point, in which I want to talk about is a time to bring your seedlings outdoors. You really want to look ahead in the forecast and find a stretch of 2 to 4 days that is going to be overcast, or at least it's going to have a lot of clouds in the sky. So you don't get a lot of that bright, direct sunlight going onto your plants. A lot of the times it's so tempting to get outside on the most beautiful, hottest days to go and plant our garden. But this can have negative side effects on our plants. Even though we as people want to go outside and enjoy the day, the plants aren't going to like that. So at the very least, look for a few days of overcast skies to plant your seedlings out. If you can't get that, then you're going to want to harden off your plants. I'll have a link down below on how to do that. In the end, it's really about giving our plants the most favorable situation as possible when getting transferred, because these things really are delicate at this stage. So the more we can do, the better. Next topic is going to be soil. Right here, I have some IMO amendments that I'm going to be feeding these plants as I transfer them into the soil. If you're not familiar with IMOs or mycorrhizal fungi, this is going to be a huge benefit in your garden. If you've never used it before, you're going to see that living soil is healthy soil, and that healthy soil is going to feed your plants the nutrients that they need in order to give you guys the best harvest as possible. What this mycorrhizal fungi really does as it grows is it sets up a symbiotic relationship with your plant's roots. It's going to feed your plants the nutrients that it needs, and over time it helps break down all the different organic matter in the soil too. This also develops a sort of glue, if you will, that kind of helps retain water and holds your soil together. So instead of tilling your soil up every year and killing it, I always recommend setting up a mycorrhizal fungi system instead and not tilling up your soil. You're just constantly adding more and more organic matter year after year, feeding this mycorrhizal fungi, which is in turn going to be feeding your plants so much better than anything else out there. Let's take a look at how I apply this as we transplant our cucumber seedlings here onto our trellis. So when planting our cucumbers here, we're just going to take a little sprinkle of this mycorrhizal fungi and spread it around that root system here. This is really going to make a big difference in this plant. If you can see, this is a great size to plant your seedlings on. You want 1 to 2 full sets of true leaves. So you've got the cotyledon leaves down below, and then you have your true sets of leaves. You want to plant these before there's several sets of true leaves, because once you're to that point, chances are you're going to have some root bound going on in the soil here. So to avoid that, usually transplant out when you've got 1 to 2 sets. So we've got the fungi in there, and if you notice, if you look at the top of our soil, we add in a lot of mulch and wood chips to this too. So there's a lot of organic matter. As you can see, I can just drive my hand right into the soil here without very much resistance because there's so much organic material in here. It's a really loamy soil that is just so great to the plants. After a couple of years of growing in this, I found that year after year, I have better and better results with the plants growing in here. So I'm going to put 3 plants of cucumbers in here for this trellis area. I'll show you guys that in a second. For our plan, we've just got this grate here that they're going to be growing up on. And I've had great results with trellising cucumbers. If you guys have not done it before, I really, really recommend it. Just works out so much better for the plant than if it were growing along the ground. You're going to have better harvest overall, and I think you're going to notice that within your first year. If you do trellis cucumbers this year, which I highly, highly recommend, you're going to be very happy with the results, and I'd be surprised if you ever go back after trellising. When digging your hole for your seedlings, it is also advisable to dig one that is about 2 to 3 times the size of your original plug. All right, just for fun, I think I'm going to put in 1 more cucumber here. So they are spaced a little bit tighter than what they normally would, but that's another great benefit of trellising, is because you can grow so much on this area. If you think about it, we just don't have the floor space to grow on, but now we have all of this space growing all the way up this grate here that can really maximize our harvest when growing all sorts of crops. Growing on a trellis really, really helps out. Not only with cucumbers, but you can also use the same technique with tomatoes, which is what we're going to do this year in all of our garden beds for our tomato plants. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of this IMO on top of the soil so it gets soaked in on that mulch and can really start growing into the living soil that we want to create here. So bonus lesson while growing these cucumber seedlings is grow them on a trellis this year. You guys are going to love it. So now that we know timing is so important when growing seedlings, as well as the size of our plants that we're growing, the next thing I want to talk about is specifically related to these tomato plants. As you can see here, we buried these all the way up to the true sets of leaves. This is called burying deep. The reason why we do this is because it's actually going to produce roots all the way throughout that tomato plant where that stem is now buried. So now when planting this tomato, instead of keeping the soil level right where it was, I'm going to bring that all the way up to the top. I'll show you guys how I do that right here. And while I'm doing this, now is a good time to show you guys the difference between air pruning pots and not air pruning pots. You see how the roots are curled around there? We don't want that. And that's why I have been growing all of my tomato seedlings now in these air pruning pots, is because I don't get that. I don't get any root bound seedlings when growing them that way. So let's get this last tomato planted right here. Again, I want to make sure I get a nice and deep hole so I can get this brought all the way up to the top here. That should be good. If you don't have any organic matter like this mulch or any sort of amendment to keep the soil alive and active, I really recommend that you guys start doing that as soon as possible. Throughout the many years of growing and gardening, I've realized that it's not just a simple process. We're really growing soil here. We're not just growing plants. I've found that instead of going to the store and buying fertilizer or buying amendments that somebody else has made for me, I find it so much more rewarding, and I've actually found better plants, better harvest from keeping this system rotating and going back into itself. So at the end of the season, instead of chopping up all my dead vegetables and throwing them away into a compost, what I'll actually do is leave them right on top of the soil. I'm also adding wood chips and mulch to the soil and that mycorrhizal fungi. Altogether, this creates an amazing system that is going to feed your plants. It's going to do exactly what the fertilizer does at the store, but it's a closed loop system. So you're not wasting anything. Everything is working together. And I just find stuff like that is absolutely beautiful and kind of the way that Mother Earth has intended it to be. So I think it's all about working with the system as it was made. If you have any free time, I really suggest that you guys look up IMOs or Korean natural farming, because we're sort of implementing some of that with that mycorrhizal fungi. And if you haven't used it before, you guys are gonna find some great benefits in your garden because of it. Well guys, I would say that our garden is ready to be kicked off in the right way. And this is only one of our raised garden beds. We have 2 more growing that is going to be full of different vegetables. We have more food growing this year than we've ever had before, and I'm so excited for it. So in today's video, we essentially covered timing, how crucial it is to time out your plants, how crucial it is to plant your seeds at the right time even. We don't want to be planting those seeds too early, otherwise we're going to be getting root-bound plants. Once we've grown our plants inside and we're ready to bring them outside, we have to make sure that the weather is warm enough that it's not going to damage or hurt those plants. You can also look forward in the forecast to make sure that you have some nice overcast days ahead so those plants aren't harmed by the sunlight once they're being brought outside. Mycorrhizal fungi is the next thing that we talked about when transplanting seedlings in the garden. This is going to help out your root system so much. I don't have to talk about it much more. I just think you guys should give it a Google and search mycorrhizal fungi, IMOs, Korean natural farming, and see if it's something that can benefit you in the garden. I pretty much know that it definitely is going to be. Along the same lines of soil health, we talked about adding mulch and compost to our garden so we can attract earthworms, microorganisms, and other beneficial organisms that are going to increase the amount of nutrients that are available over time for our plants to uptake. Adding wood chips, mulch, leaves, and even straw to the top of your garden bed is really going to help out over time. And if you have them on top of your garden bed for a while, lift it up, you're going to see so many living things under there, it might just blow you away. And all of those things are going to be adding nutrients to our plants. Last but not least, watch your plants to make sure that they're watered correctly. Adding in mulch and wood chips is really going to help retain the moisture in the soil, compared to if we had a soil mixture that was full of clay and sand. This isn't really going to do well because that clay is going to stiffen up and is not going to retain moisture, and it's going to end up waterlogging your plants because that water is not going to be able to drain, but it's going to just pool right there. What we really want is a mixture that's going to absorb and retain a certain amount of moisture, but let a lot more of it go through to the soil, and it's not going to be waterlogging your plants. This is another way that wood chips and mulch is really going to help out your garden bed and help out the health of your plants, is because it helps with watering so much. Different sort of plants also have different watering requirements, so please give that a Google before you guys go and water all of your plants the same. Some of them might need a little bit different watering requirements than others. I usually am out in my garden watering it about once every 2 to 3 days. This all depends, again, on the weather. If we have rainy days or not, this can vary a lot. Sometimes it may be up to a week from the point where I water my garden bed. So this is one thing that is going to be dependent on your experience, as well as just knowing when these plants need to be watered. So give it a Google if you don't already know, or if you don't know how to feel it out. And keep a farmer's journal or something to jot down your experience this year, because that's going to help you out in future years, because you're going to realize the different failures you made and then the different successes that you made too. And you want to write down the time that you do everything and how you maybe want to change it in the future. So that's it for today's video. I hope you found it entertaining and possibly even learned a little bit. I encourage you guys all to go out there and just start a garden no matter what. Start growing veggies, flowers, fruit trees, anything you can in whatever space that you can as well. Get out there and grow. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.